Here we have the athlete performing the overhead squat from the front view. We can see that as he starts the descent phase, he laterally shifts onto his right leg. Now if we look at the athlete performing the overhead squat from the rear, again we can see that he laterally shifts the weight onto the right leg. And because of this lateral shift to the right leg, we can see in the lumbar spine there is a curvature. So if we start from the top, when the athlete reaches parallel depth, a slight curve is seen and the athlete loses his neutral spine. Originally my hypothesis was that the athlete contains a lack of mobility in the left hip in comparison to the right, and this was the reason why he was shifting to his right side. So here I perform a hip mobility test, and I wanted to see when the opposite leg rised off the ground when I applied pressure on the knee towards the chest. As you can see here, the line here indicates which angle he achieved when the leg opposite started to rise off the floor. Now if I go to the right leg, my original hypothesis was that I'd be able to achieve greater range of motion. As you can see a similar pattern. The athlete has similar range of motion in the hip in both sides. Again, and you can see a slight elevation off the ground in the opposite leg. This completely throws out my original hypothesis of a lack of mobility being the issue. I've now asked the athlete to perform a glute activation test. I've placed the athlete's trunk on the edge of the bench. The lumbar spine is positioned in a neutral alignment. One foot will stay on the floor to support the pelvic position, and the other knee is flexed to past 90 degrees. The athlete will then rise one leg, the bent leg, into a hip extension. Keeping the knee flexed will limit the hamstrings, so the glutes must be engaged. Areas to look for is the range of motion as the leg extends. And another aspect is the athlete able to maintain a neutral spine without any hyperextension or rotation in the lumbar spine. So what we can see here is the athlete extending the right leg whilst maintaining a neutral spine. I've drawn a line to indicate the range of motion achieved on the right leg. I've now asked the athlete to perform the same on the left leg. As you can see, he is unable to reach the same range of motion in comparison to the right leg, whilst maintaining a neutral alignment in the lumbar spine. Although I would never conclude that the athlete shifts to the right side just because he shows greater glute activation. However, it is possibly a capacity issue which may need addressing to ensure the athlete performs the squat movement without relying too much on one side. Here we have an athlete performing the overhead squat. The athlete displays good mobility in the overhead squat. However, when the athlete reaches parallel depth to the ground, you can see that the athlete is slightly off balance. From On the side view, we can see the athlete reaches parallel depth in the overhead squat. And he maintains a neutral spine whilst achieving parallel depth. The shoulders are externally rotated and the bar doesn't travel too far forward. Having said that, as the athlete starts the ascent phase in the overhead squat, observe how the loss of balance is seen in the foot segment. It seems the centre of mass is shifting excessively towards the heels, and you can see the toes rising. This shows this is a clear skill issue, as the athlete clearly shows good mobility throughout the overhead squat. However, when he reaches parallel depth, he loses control of the exercise and starts to tilt back and forth. Rises, his knees are being moved out the way. He reaches then the power position, he generates that force from the hips. He extends through the hips. The barbell does not travel too far away from the body. He racks it and then reaches full depth or parallel depth in the squat. So now I'm going to show you the athlete performing the clean exercise again from the side view. However, I'm going to show you this video in normal time. In this video, you will see the athlete produces this sort of stutter effect, where the movement is too slowly. The reasons why this movement is too slowly is because the athlete lacks the motor control, and he has to break down the exercise slowly in order to perform this exercise effectively. So what I'm going to do now is press play in normal time to show you exactly what I mean. Initially, when observing the athlete perform the clean, he performs this exercise much quicker in comparison to the previous athlete, who performed this exercise much slower. As you can see, he triple extends effectively. However, if we break down the technical models involved in the clean, this athlete shows some capacity issues. Firstly, during the first pull, the athlete is unable to remove the knees out of the way of the barbell as it rises. This is due to a hamstring mobility issue. When focusing on the shoulder girdle, the athlete shows excessive protraction, which leads to a slight kyphotic curve in the thoracic spine when he catches the barbell. And finally, the athlete can only place the elbows directly under the barbell, and he cannot go any further. I've now asked the athlete to perform a shoulder mobility test similar to the one performed in the functional movement screening. The reason why I've asked the athlete to do this test is because this will show us whether he contains an impingement in the shoulder girdle. As we can see from the left side, the athlete contains good mobility. However, when the athlete reaches on the right side, you can see there's a fair distance apart.